The nurse didn't react when they laughed at her, not when the senior surgeon mocked her accent, not when the residents smirked as she walked by, and not when one of them muttered, "They're really lowering standards now." She just kept walking, because none of them knew who she used to be. None of them knew that 5 years ago she had been one of the most respected cardiac surgeons in the country, and none of them knew that in less than 10 minutes, the most powerful man in the hospital would be fighting for his life, and the only person who could save him was the nurse they had just humiliated. The nurse didn't react when they laughed at her, not when the senior surgeon mocked her accent, not when the residents smirked as she walked by, and not when one of them muttered, "They're really lowering standards now." She just kept walking, because none of them knew who she used to be. None of them knew that 5 years ago, she had been one of the most respected cardiac surgeons in the country, and none of them knew that in less than 10 minutes, the most powerful man in the hospital would be fighting for his life, and the only person who could save him was the nurse they had just humiliated. Before we continue, like this video, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Morning light spilled through the tall glass windows of the private Manhattan hospital, casting soft reflections across polished marble floors. The place didn't feel like a hospital. It felt like a five-star hotel that just happened to save lives. Quiet, controlled, expensive. Patients here weren't just patients. They were investors, executives, people whose names opened doors. And every staff member knew it. Which is why reputation mattered more here than anywhere else, and why mistakes were never forgiven. Dr. Richard Kane stood at the doctor's station, scrolling through a chart on his tablet, a coffee cup balanced casually in his hand. He was one of the hospital's top surgeons, known for his confidence, his precision, and his complete lack of patience. He had built his career on control, and he didn't like things he couldn't control. That's why his eyes narrowed slightly as the new nurse walked past. She moved quickly, efficiently, her navy scrubs neat, her posture straight, her focus steady. She carried a stack of patient charts against her chest, checking notes as she walked. She didn't look at anyone. She didn't smile. She just worked. Kane watched her go. Then he let out a quiet scoff. "They're really lowering the bar these days," he said, not bothering to lower his voice. Two residents standing nearby glanced up. One followed Kane's line of sight. The new nurse had just turned the corner. "She knew?" the resident asked. "Just started last month," Kane replied. "Transfers in from out of state, apparently." The other resident smirked. Doesn't look like she's been doing this long." Kane leaned back in his chair. "She looks like she just graduated," he said. "And this is one of the most elite hospitals in New York." A quiet chuckle passed between them. They didn't notice the nurse slow down slightly as she reached the end of the hallway. They didn't notice the way her grip tightened around the charts for just a moment, and they definitely didn't know that she heard every word. Her name badge read, M. Carter, R.N. Maya. Carter kept walking. Her face stayed calm, neutral, professional. She had heard worse, much worse. 20 years in medicine had taught her how to listen without reacting. 12 years as one of the most respected cardiac surgeons in the country had taught her how to stand still while people underestimated her. But that was another life. 5 years ago, Dr. Maya Carter had disappeared. Now she was just the nurse. And most days, she preferred it that way. At the end of the hallway, she stopped to check a patient chart. Her hands moved quickly, practiced, confident. She updated a note, adjusted a dosage entry, and closed the file. A younger nurse approached her. "Room 814 is asking for you," the younger woman said. "They said you explained everything more clearly yesterday." Maya nodded. "I'll go now." She walked toward the elevator, her steps quiet, steady. Inside, she caught a glimpse of herself in the reflective metal wall. 38 years old. But most people guessed younger. Her smooth skin, petite frame, and calm demeanor made people assume she was new, inexperienced, still learning. It was one of the reasons she had chosen this path. It made it easier to disappear. The elevator doors opened. Room 814 was a long-term patient recovering from heart surgery. An older man. Nervous. Always full of questions. When Maya entered, his face lit up. "Ah, there you are," he said. "I was hoping it'd be you." She smiled gently. "How are you feeling this morning?" "Better, less pain." She checked his monitors, adjusting a setting slightly. "You're healing well," she said. "Your vitals look strong." He studied her face for a moment. "You explain things better than the doctors," he said quietly. She paused, then gave a small, polite smile. "They're very busy," she replied. But inside something stirred. Not pride, not regret. Just a quiet reminder. She used to be one of them. One of the best, actually. And there was a time when surgeons from across the country flew in to observe her procedures. When medical conferences asked her to speak. When entire teams stood still as she walked into an operating room. And now, she was adjusting IV settings and delivering medications. And for the first time in years, she felt at peace. The morning moved on. Rounds began. The hospital filled with the quiet rhythm of organized chaos. Footsteps in the halls, phones ringing, low voices discussing cases. At the doctor's station, Kane flipped through another chart. "Where's that new nurse?" he asked casually. One of the residents shrugged. "Probably on rounds." Kane shook his head. "I don't like not knowing where my staff is." "She's not your staff," the resident said carefully. "She's assigned to general rotation." Kane took a sip of coffee. "In this hospital," he said, "everyone is my staff." Across the floor, Maya was finishing up with another patient when the overhead speakers suddenly crackled to life. The tone that followed was unmistakable. Sharp, urgent. "Medical emergency, VIP suite, top floor. All available staff respond immediately." Maya's head snapped up. VIP suite. Her body reacted before her mind did. She was already moving, down the hallway, past the nurse's station, past the elevators. The elevators would take too long. She pushed open the stairwell door and started climbing. Fast. Focused. Precise. Each step taken two at a time. Her breathing stayed steady, her mind already running through possibilities. Cardiac arrest, stroke, respiratory failure, anaphylaxis. She reached the top floor in seconds and pushed through the door. Two nurses stood outside the VIP suite, panic written across their faces. Inside, a man in his mid-40s sat on the edge of the bed, gasping for air. His face was flushed, his hands trembled. His breathing was rapid and shallow. Maya walked in, calm and direct. "What happened?" One of the nurses answered quickly. "He said he feels strange. His chest feels tight. His face started swelling." Maya stepped closer. Her eyes moved quickly, lips slightly swollen. Red blotches forming on his neck. Pulse fast, breathing tight. Her training snapped into place instantly. "Did he eat anything recently?" "Room service left about 10 minutes ago." "What did he have?" "Shrimp pasta." Her voice turned firm. "Anaphylaxis." The nurses froze. Maya moved to check his pulse again. It was getting faster, more erratic. We need epinephrine, now," she said. "Call the emergency response team." One nurse hesitated. "Shouldn't we wait for the doctor?" Maya looked at the man again. His throat was starting to tighten. His breaths were coming in shorter. There was no time. "His airway is closing," she said calmly but firmly. "Get the emergency medication kit." Something in her voice cut through the hesitation. The nurse ran. Maya stayed beside the patient, speaking softly. "Stay with me," she said. "Help is coming." His eyes were wide now. Fear creeping in. He tried to speak, but his voice came out strained. And that's when the door burst open. Dr. Richard Kane walked in with two residents behind him. He looked irritated. "What's going on?" Then he saw Maya standing at the bedside. And why is a nurse giving orders?" Maya didn't look at him. "Severe allergic reaction," she said steadily. "He needs epinephrine immediately." Kane glanced at the patient, then at the chart. I'll assess, he said. Step aside. Her eyes stayed on the patient. Doctor, his symptoms are progressing rapidly. I said step aside. He moved forward slowly, beginning his evaluation, asking questions, checking the chart, looking at monitors, while the man struggled to breathe. Maya's jaw tightened. Seconds mattered, and they were slipping away. The nurse returned with the emergency kit. Kane took it, still moving slowly, still talking, still asking questions. Maya watched the patient's lips begin to turn a faint shade of blue. And something deep inside her, something she had buried for 5 years, began to rise. Or not fear, not anger, instinct. The same instinct that had saved hundreds of lives in operating rooms across the world. Doctor, she said, more urgent now. He needs epinephrine. Kane didn't look at her. I will decide the treatment plan. The patient choked for air. His chest rose sharply, then fell. And Maya made a decision. She stepped forward, reached into the kit, pulled out the auto-injector, and in one smooth motion, administered the shot. Silence. Kane turned. His face darkened. What did you just do? The room froze. You administered medication without my authorization, he said, voice rising. That is a terminable offense. Maya didn't respond. She was watching the patient, counting seconds, waiting. Then suddenly, the man gasped. A deep, desperate breath filled his lungs. Night color began returning to his face. The swelling started to ease. His shoulders dropped slightly as air finally moved freely again. Relief washed over the room. And then, the man looked up, his eyes focused on Maya. Recognition flickered, then shock. Maya? Her heart skipped. Dr. Carter? The room went completely silent, and everything was about to change. The room stayed frozen. No one spoke. No one moved. Dr. Richard Kane looked from the patient to the nurse and back again, clearly trying to understand what he had just heard. Dr. Carter? The man repeated, his voice still hoarse but steadier now. Maya stood still beside the bed, her hand resting lightly near the patient's shoulder as she watched his breathing stabilize. For a moment, she said nothing. Then, quietly, hello. Kane frowned. You two know each other? He asked sharply. The patient didn't take his eyes off her. You saved my life, he said. The words hung in the air like something sacred. The nurses exchanged confused glances. Kane's expression tightened. Sir, he said carefully, this is one of our nurses. The man turned his head slowly toward him, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. This, the man said calmly, is Dr. Maya Carter. Silence. One of the residents shifted uneasily. Kane forced a tight smile. I think there's been some confusion. The man's gaze hardened. There is no confusion. He looked back at Maya, studying her face as if making sure she was real. You disappeared, he said. I looked for you. Maya kept her voice steady. It's been a long time. Kane's confidence began to slip. You're a doctor? One of the nurses asked softly. Maya didn't answer. The man did. She's not just a doctor, he said. She's one of the best cardiac surgeons I've ever heard of. Kane's eyes widened slightly. That's not possible, he said. I know the top surgeons in this city. The man gave a faint, humorless smile. She wasn't just in this city. He looked at Maya again. So you were everywhere. And suddenly, 5 years melted away. 5 years earlier, a surgical theater filled with bright lights and absolute silence. 12 people stood around the operating table. No one spoke unless they had to, because Dr. Maya Carter was operating. She moved with quiet precision, her hands steady, her focus unbreakable. A heart surgery that most surgeons wouldn't attempt. Too complex, too risky. But for Maya, this was where she felt most alive. Clamp, she said calmly. A nurse placed the instrument into her hand without hesitation. Every movement was deliberate, every decision immediate. The patient's life rested in the space between her fingers, and she never wavered. After hours of careful work, she finally stepped back. "It's stable," she said quietly. The room let out a breath all at once. Another life saved. Another impossible case completed. In the hallway afterward, younger doctors waited just to see her walk out. Not to talk, not to question, just to witness. She had become a legend in her field, invited to conferences, quoted in journals, observed by other surgeons hoping to learn. But the work never stopped, and neither did the pressure. Long nights, constant expectations, patients who saw her as their last hope. And one day, the weight began to crack something inside her. It wasn't one moment. It was 1,000 small ones. The night she lost a patient after a 16-hour surgery. The family who blamed her. The exhaustion that followed her home every night. The quiet realization that no matter how many people she saved, there would always be more she couldn't. So when a humanitarian mission asked if she would volunteer overseas for a few months, she said yes. She told herself it was just a break, just a reset. But deep down, she knew she was already walking away. The rain had been relentless that week. The remote clinic was small, understaffed, and barely equipped. But people kept coming. Villagers, children, elderly patients who had waited months for help. Maya worked 12-hour days, sometimes more, treating infections, performing minor surgeries, doing whatever she could. It was the first time in years that medicine felt simple again, honest, human. Then one afternoon, everything changed. A truck came speeding down the dirt road, tires kicking up mud. 3 men jumped out, shouting for help. "There's been an accident," one of them yelled. "Wait, he's not breathing right." They carried a man inside on a makeshift stretcher. Unconscious, blood matted in his hair, breathing shallow, head injury. Severe. Maya's mind shifted instantly into surgeon mode. "How long ago?" she asked. 30 minutes, someone replied. The nearest hospital was over 3 hours away. He wouldn't survive the journey. Another doctor pulled her aside. "We don't have the equipment for this," he said quietly. "If we try and fail, he dies," Maya finished. She looked at the man again. Young, maybe early 30s, still breathing, still fighting. "If we do nothing," she said, "he dies anyway." So she began, with limited tools, no proper imaging, no advanced support, just skill, instinct, and the refusal to give up. Hours passed. Her hands never shook, her focus never broke. And when it was finally over, she stepped back, exhausted. All she could do now was wait. 18 hours later. The man opened his eyes. The first thing he saw was her face. "You're safe," she told him gently. He tried to speak, but his voice was weak. "You saved me." She shook her head slightly. "I did what I could." But he didn't forget. Not her face, not her voice, not the way she had refused to give up on him. Back in the present, the man sat up slowly in the hospital bed, stronger now. Kane stood off to the side, completely silent. The room felt different now. Shifted. Changed. "After I recovered," the man said, still looking at Maya, "I tried to find you. I wanted to thank you." Maya kept her tone professional. "The mission ended. I came home." "That's not what I meant," he said softly. "You vanished." She didn't answer, because the truth was harder to explain. When the charity lost its funding, the clinics shut down. Dozens of places closed overnight. People who had depended on them were suddenly alone again. Maya came home feeling like everything she had built meant nothing. She had saved one man, but she couldn't save the system. And something inside her broke. Months passed. She stopped operating, stopped returning calls, stopped showing up. Eventually, she took a job as a nurse. Smaller responsibilities, less pressure, a quieter life, and no one recognized her. Until now. Kane cleared his throat. "So," he said slowly, "you used to be a surgeon." The man turned toward him sharply. "Used to?" he said. Kane faltered. "I just meant..." "She was one of the best in the world," the man said coldly. People studied her work. Silence. Kane swallowed. I wasn't aware. I heard you in the hallway earlier, the man continued. Before I got sick. Kane's face went pale. I I didn't know she could hear. Be quiet. The authority in the man's voice was unmistakable. Everyone in the room felt it. Maya looked at him more closely now, at the calm intensity, at the quiet power. And she remembered. The way people moved around him. The way no one questioned him. The way respect followed him without being asked. He wasn't just a patient. He was someone important. Very important. He turned back to her. Why are you working as a nurse? The question was gentle, not accusing, just honest. She hesitated, then answered truthfully. I got tired, she said, of fighting systems I couldn't change. He studied her for a long moment. And in that moment, Maya realized something. The man she had saved years ago was no longer just a survivor. He was a man with power now. Real power. And the way the hospital staff treated him, the way Kane stood so carefully now, told her exactly what kind of power it was. He leaned back against the pillows. You haven't lost it, he said quietly. You stepped in without hesitation. She didn't respond, but inside she knew he was right. The instinct had never left. It had only been sleeping. And you saved my life, he added. For the second time. Kane shifted uncomfortably. Sir, he said, trying to regain some control, we'll make sure you receive the best care moving forward. The man looked at him. And Kane fell silent again, because in that look, there was something dangerous, something cold, and something that made it very clear. The balance of power in the room had changed completely. Later, in the quiet hallway outside the suite, Kane stood waiting. Maya stepped out after finishing her checks. He approached her quickly. I didn't know who you were, he said. She met his eyes calmly. Would it have mattered? He hesitated, then looked away. Inside the recovery room, the man sat alone, thinking, watching the city's skyline through the window. When Maya returned, he turned toward her. I own hospitals, he said simply. She didn't react. A lot of them. She stayed silent. And they all have the same problem you saw today. Egos, pride, talent being ignored. People like you, he said, should be running them. Maya felt something shift inside her. For the first time in years, someone was asking her to step back into the world she left. And she wasn't sure if she was ready, or if she was afraid. The hospital grew quieter as evening settled over Manhattan. The VIP floor lights dimmed slightly, softening the harsh clinical glow into something warmer, almost peaceful. Inside the private suite, the Mafia boss sat upright in bed, a blanket pulled loosely over his legs, his breathing now steady, controlled. Maya stood at the foot of the bed reviewing his chart. Everything looked stable. Heart rate normal. Oxygen levels strong. Swelling nearly gone. The danger had passed. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. The city lights shimmered beyond the window, painting reflections across the polished floor. Finally, he broke the silence. You didn't hesitate. Maya looked up. When I couldn't breathe, he continued, you didn't ask permission. You didn't wait. You just acted. She closed the chart. I followed protocol. He gave a faint smile. No, he said. You followed instinct. There was a difference, and they both knew it. He studied her for a long moment, like he was trying to understand something deeper than what was visible. 5 years, he said quietly. That's a long time to hide. She didn't answer right away, because the truth wasn't simple. Hiding hadn't been planned. It had just happened. One step at a time. One quiet decision after another. Until one day, she realized no one knew her name anymore. And part of her was relieved. You saved my life back then, he continued. In that clinic, with nothing but your hands and whatever tools you could find. Maya's gaze drifted toward the window. And then you disappeared. The mission ended, she said softly. That's not why. He wasn't asking. He already knew. She took a slow breath. I was tired, she admitted. Tired of watching people suffer because of broken systems. Tired of knowing I could save someone on the table and lose them later because they couldn't afford care. He listened quietly. I thought if I stepped away, she said, it might hurt less. And did it? She considered that. Some days. He leaned forward slightly. After I recovered, he said, I built something. Her eyes returned to his. A foundation, clinics, training programs. We've helped thousands. Maya blinked. I never told you, he continued, but everything I built started with that day in the mountains. She felt something tighten in her chest. You showed me what one person could do, he said. So I tried to multiply it. For the first time since the emergency, Maya felt something close to emotion rise. Not pride, not sadness. Just the weight of realizing that something she had done years ago had kept moving long after she walked away. I wanted to thank you, he said. That's why I tried to find you. She lowered her gaze. And now you have. Silence settled again. Then he spoke, his voice calm but firm. I own 43 hospitals. Maya looked up slowly. Across the country, he continued. Some in this city, some in places that need help more than anything. He held her eyes. And they all have the same problem. She already knew what he meant. Ego, hierarchy, people judging before listening, brilliant nurses being ignored, young doctors being pushed aside, talented people leaving because no one valued them. Exactly like what happened in the hallway that morning. I need someone who sees people, he said. Not titles, not appearances. Maya said nothing. I need someone who won't hesitate when a life is on the line. Still silence. I need someone who knows what this work is supposed to mean. He paused. Run them. The words were simple, but they hit like thunder. Chief Medical Officer, he added. Full authority over staffing, training, culture. Maya felt her pulse quicken. That's not a small job, she said quietly. No, he agreed. It's not. She let out a slow breath. I left surgery because I was burned out. Or, he said gently, you left because you didn't have the power to change what was breaking you. She didn't respond, even because part of her knew he might be right. You were saving people one at a time, he continued. What if you could save thousands by fixing the system itself? Maya turned away. The city outside stretched endlessly. Lights, movement, life continuing without pause. She had spent 5 years trying to live small, to live quiet, to stay out of the spotlight. And for the first time, she wondered if she had been healing or hiding. I'll think about it, she said. He nodded. No pressure. But they both knew the moment mattered, because once a door like that opened, it rarely stayed open forever. The hallway outside was quiet when Maya stepped out later that night. Dr. Richard Kane stood near the window, arms crossed tightly, his posture stiff. He straightened when he saw her. Dr. Carter, he said. She stopped. For a moment, neither spoke. Then he took a breath. I owe you an apology. She studied him. I shouldn't have spoken the way I did, he continued. Earlier, in the hallway. She said nothing. I judged you, he admitted. Without knowing anything about you. The honesty in his voice surprised her. Would it have mattered? She asked softly. He hesitated. Then, quietly. Yes. She held his gaze. My credentials shouldn't decide whether I deserve respect. He nodded slowly. You're right. And for the first time since she had met him, there was no arrogance in his voice, just something close to humility. I built my career on being the best, he said. And somewhere along the way I started assuming I could recognize talent just by looking. A pause. I was wrong. Maya watched him carefully. People didn't change easily, But sometimes, a moment was enough. Change starts tomorrow, she said. He frowned slightly. What do you mean? She didn't answer. Instead, she turned and walked toward the elevator. That night, she walked along the river alone. New York stretched endlessly around her, cars passing, voices in the distance, the city breathing. 5 years ago, she had walked away from everything she had built, from the operating rooms, from the pressure, from the expectations, and for a while, it had saved her. But today, when the emergency happened, she hadn't hesitated. Not for a second. The surgeon in her had never died. It had just been waiting. Her phone buzzed. A message. From an unknown number. But she already knew who it was. After you saved me, we funded 52 clinics, trained 3,000 healthcare workers, treated over 100,000 people. She stopped walking. Read it again. 100,000. Because of one decision she made years ago, another message came. Imagine what you could do now. Maya stared at the skyline, at the lives moving inside those buildings, at the thousands of people she would never meet. And suddenly the fear didn't feel as heavy. Because maybe she didn't have to carry it alone anymore. 1 week later, the hospital felt different. Not because anything had changed, but because Maya had. She stepped through the main entrance wearing a tailored navy suit, her posture straight, her expression calm, confident. People noticed. They always noticed confidence. She stepped off the elevator onto the VIP floor. Dr. Kane was at the station speaking with 2 residents. He looked up, and froze. For a second, he didn't recognize her. Then he saw the badge. Dr. Maya Carter, Chief Medical Officer. Silence spread slowly across the floor. She walked toward him. Good morning, Dr. Kane, she said calmly. His voice caught slightly. Good morning. Dr. Carter? I'd like to meet with you and the department heads this afternoon, she continued. We'll be reviewing staffing structure, training programs, and evaluation systems. He nodded quickly. Of course, she paused. And Dr. Kane? He looked at her. That nurse you were mocking last week, she said. His face tightened. She's a former head nurse from Boston. 18 years of critical care experience. His eyes widened slightly. I've promoted her to Director of Nursing Excellence, Maya continued. You'll be working closely with her. He swallowed. I understand. She studied him for a moment. This isn't about punishment, she said. It's about building a culture where people are seen for what they can do, not what they look like. He nodded again. I'm willing to learn, he said quietly. Maya gave a small nod. Good. Then she turned and walked down the hall. Inside the executive elevator, the Mafia boss was waiting, fully recovered now, dressed in a dark suit. He smiled when he saw her. How does it feel? He asked. Maya let out a slow breath. Terrifying, she admitted. Then she smiled slightly. But right. He nodded. Good. The elevator doors closed. We've got 42 more hospitals to change, he said. Maya looked forward. For the first time in years, she felt like herself again. Let's get to work, she said. And this time, she didn't look back.
If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with someone who believes kindness still exists in this world. This is Midnight Archives, where power meets humanity.